People in charge from the governor of Wisconsin on down refused to enforce the law. They stood back and they watched Kenosha burn. So are we really surprised that looting and arson accelerated to murder? How shocked are we that 17-year-olds with rifles decided they had to maintain order when no one else would?
Now, those insane comments from Tucker Carlson drew a ton of backlash and anger, and for obvious reasons. But Tucker has said things that are just as bad in the past, and he's kept his job. So have his colleagues like Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham, just to name a couple. Take a listen to something Ingraham said 2 years ago, comments that caused some advertisers to pull the plug on her program.
In some parts of the country, it does seem like the America that we know and love doesn't exist anymore. Massive demographic changes have been foisted upon the American people. And they're changes that none of us ever voted for and most of us don't like. Much of this is related to both illegal and, in some cases, legal immigration that, of course, progressives love.
Brian Stelter's new book, Hoax, details how countless employees at Fox don't agree with the stuff like you just heard, but they continue to hold their noses and their tongues just to collect their paychecks. Stelter, he's back now to talk more about that. Well, let's talk about behind the doors at Fox. At one point in your book, you're right, journalism at Fox was being suffocated. To management, it didn't seem to matter. Thanks to its loyal viewership, a business model that privileged ratings above all else, revenue continued to flow. And you talk about there's this unholy trinity. You've got the money, you've got the power, and sometimes the lack of other options. Did people learn quickly on that if you didn't get on board with this, you were going to have a hard time, A, lasting at the network, and also B, finding another landing spot? And they looked around, and I just know that you can't just unwind the clock. If you've been a talking head and you've been purporting or even promoting some of these things, you're going to have a hard time getting a gig at a CNN or an MS or another major network here. How much of a reality inside of Fox is it that they're in for a penny, in for a pound?
That's a big part of the dynamic. And it came up again and again in my interviews with Fox hosts and commentators and staffers. There have been some who have left, from Megyn Kelly to Shep Smith and many correspondents in between. There have been anchors and reporters who've looked around and said, I don't fit in here anymore. I can't be as Trumpy as this network wants me to be. And when I say this network, a lot of this has to do with the audience. Hoax is partly a story about what's happened to the Republican Party and the GOP base, preferring propaganda over news. And that's not just Trump's fault. That's been happening for many decades. Distrust of media has been growing and growing and growing, partly because of the media's own mistakes, but also partly because of a political campaign to delegitimize real journalism. Of course, Trump has taken that and he's amped it up to 11, and that campaign is worse than ever. But I think part of this story is about the audience and what the audience wants and why the audience wants it. And frankly, that's kind of unsettling.
Yeah,
that's a difficult part of this.
And I want to get to the audience, but you write about Roger Ailes, who this was his brainchild, and obviously he was rightly shown the door when he was. But you're not so sure that Ailes would have let the network be as co-opted by Trump as it has been. To that end, who needs who more at this point? Does Fox need Trump more or vice versa?
I think now Trump needs Fox more than Fox needs Trump. Because at its heart, Fox News is anti-Democrat more than it is pro-Republican. It's easier to be against something than for something. I know that's sad to say, but it sometimes sure seems true, right? So I think whether or not Trump is in office or Biden's in office next year, Fox will do just fine. Trump needs the propaganda on Fox in order to keep his base secure so that there aren't leaks in the dam that's holding back, support. So I think that's pretty clear. And if Roger Ailes were in charge, he may well have pushed back on Trump. He may have tried to hit back when Trump attacks Fox's news anchors. And that's one of the things Trump does now. He works the refs. He wants more opinion, less news on Fox. So he attacks Chris Wallace. He attacks some of the other news anchors like Neil Cavuto, because he doesn't want to hear that stuff. He only wants to hear the rah-rah pro-Trump opinion. I think if Roger Ailes had been there, he might have stood up to Trump on those occasions.
Do you have any sense where the line is, Brian? I know it's a moving target, but let me give not too much of a reach here. Let's say it's November and the president doesn't wait for all the votes to be counted, and he declares victory while so many of the mail-in ballots haven't been tallied yet. Or what if the president loses and he decides he's not going to leave? Is there a line in your mind that Fox says even they can't cross?
I hope so. I don't know if I can say confidently that there is, but I think all of us have to keep an eye on this in November. It's going to be about Rupert Murdoch, his son Lachlan Murdoch, who runs the company, and Suzanne Scott, who runs the news division, who runs the news operation, that runs all of Fox News Media. What will they do? Because, Fox News has a very respected, really impressive decision desk, just like CNN, just like NBC. They've got great professionals who call these races, who crunch the numbers. Will Fox News as a company side with them or the propagandists?
And I remember one election night, Megyn Kelly walked down there and finally she basically told Karl Rove, enough, game over here, we got Ohio.
Right, you have to accept reality at some point. That was the message in 2012 to Karl Rove, accept reality. But I fear that in the past 8 years, our country is split up much more, that we are further apart into two different realities, and Fox is the cornerstone of that alternative reality for Trump.
And my last question would be, given the tribalization that you said, come back to the Fox viewer. Do they know that they're being conned by some of this and don't care? Or do they believe everything that Tucker and the rest of the folks, Hannity, et cetera, in primetime are telling them?
I think many Fox viewers, as in the case of many Trump supporters, believe Trump and Tucker and Sean and Laura are their champions, are standing up for them in an increasingly multicultural, dramatically changing America. They feel that these are bastions for their traditional values. What I would say about that is the news is not fake. There are no such thing as alternative facts. And I'm not saying that from a position of me being up on a mountaintop. I want to talk with anybody who thinks that the president never lies to them. Email me. My email address is bstelter@gmail.com. I think that the more accessible and transparent we can be, the more honest we can be with each other, and the better off we are as a country. And maybe we can be a little less divided if we can see each other as human beings and not as the caricatures that Fox portrays.
There's so many other things I'd love to get into in terms of also the stifling of the press, what's happening in Voice of America, and so many things. But I think it's the most dangerous time I've seen here. And when you have a major network fomenting racial division with everything that's going on and aiding and abetting, the lack of confidence we can have in even our own elections, my God. But anyway, it's a fascinating book. Again, Hoax, Donald Trump, Fox News, and the Dangerous Distortion of Truth. Brian, I appreciate a few minutes. Thank you.
Hey, keep up the fight. Thank you.
Up next, President Trump spoke to World War vets today to commemorate the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. But even that visit was highly politicized. We're going to show you why many veterans were against him, even going in the first place.